Hello, everyone. We're gonna give it another maybe like 1 or 2 minutes to make sure that everyone's joining, and then we can get started. For people right now. For 5 people on the line right now. I think Lan, you have to
Yeah.
change your setting to everyone.
I'm so new to all this.
Yeah. All right. So I think 50 people on the line right now. I think we can get started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining VFS event today. My name is Vu Tran. I'm currently an investment banking associate at Macquarie, based in New York, and I'm also one of the co-founders of Vietnam Finance Society. VFS is a 501c3 nonprofit organization committed to building a stronger Vietnamese finance professional network. We do it through our executive series, through our fellowship program, or through our topic-focused webinar series and events, such as the Women Leaders in Business series, and also how I got my job in Vietnam, which is what you're seeing right now. This is the third installment of the series, hearing all the audience feedback, and this is basically we do the series as a goal to create a bridge between Vietnam and the Vietnamese overseas community. Um, and Today, my friend Diem Tran will be the main moderator for the event. But I will be helping with the Q&A. And before we start, I think it would be really helpful to get to know everyone first, and maybe do some polling questions. So the first polling question is where are you polling from? Yes, let's see if we pick the morning. We pick the morning U.S. time to make sure that folks from all over the globe can join. Uh, so 40 people have voted. Lan and Vu, can you see the results?
No, we
Not
can't.
yet.
Oh,
I can't
okay.
see it.
Not okay. Okay, so only I can see it. And polling, share results. Can you see it?
Yep.
Yeah. So pretty kind of like even mix. I think that's interesting. There's some folks from Vietnam and folks from the United States and Europe, which makes
Yeah.
sense. Um,
Guys from Vietnam, what are you thinking?
yeah, should be watching Premier League right now. All right. The next question is, which industry do you work in? So it should be the obvious answer because everyone should be from finance. But I don't know. Maybe there's some people who are in other industries who may be interested in hearing about the investments industry. And polling. Yeah. So interestingly, there are also non-finance people on the line. So hopefully you have a good time. Stop sharing results. And then the last poll. How many years of work experience do you have? All right. So yeah, as expected, I think most of the audience have been the young professionals and the student side, but also we saw a number of folks who are kind of like on the senior side, and probably would love probably want to hear what's going on in Vietnam. So that's the end of the polling part. And before we officially start, I would like to say thank you so much for our speakers for your time, and I'll be back during the Q&A session. So I hand it over to you, Diem.
Well, good morning, good evening, and good day to everybody on in the audience today. I'm super excited to have this conversation. Today we are going to go over how I got my job in Vietnam. And we have two amazing panelists. We have Lan Dao, who's a director, and Nguyen, who is an associate director at Temasek. So today we're going to go through not only their personal experience and their thoughts on the market, but we'll also be able to conclude the conversation with some Q&A from the group. So I am Diem Tran. I'm a marketing IR professional at a firm called LDR Capital. And I will turn it over to the panelists to introduce themselves. Lan, you want to start?
Hi. Yes, sure. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Vietnam Finance Society, for this opportunity to share our experience with everyone from US, Europe, Singapore, and even Vietnam. My name is Lan. I graduated from London School of Economics in 2005. And after that, I worked for Lehman Brothers in London for 3 years as a credit structurer. And I saw the Lehman crash coming, so I wish I did actually know that it's coming down. But before, just 3 months before it went under in June 2008, I moved to Singapore to join Temasek. I spent 2 years in Singapore, and in 2010, I moved back to Temasek office in Vietnam, and currently oversee the investment activity in Vietnam. And some of the investment that I was involved in the past include Vinamilk, FPT, e-commerce, Lazada, VNG, and others. And just a little bit about my personal hobbies. I like to run, I like to swim, and I am a nature lover. I have 2 sons, 8 and 10 years old. So that's about me.
And
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. It's great to. I'm very impressed that 50 people like you guys dialing in at this time of the day. It's pretty amazing to have such a large group of professionals. By the way, I also graduated from the London School of Economics in 2007. Then I started working for KPMG in London as an accountant. And after KPMG, then I started to move into the world of investment management, starting at Orbis in London, which is a mutual funds, and Nomura, Alliance, Bernstein, and so on. Before I came back to Vietnam, I was working as in a hedge fund. We were doing equity long short, market neutral, specializing in energy, infrastructure, and utilities. That was when I worked from 2015 until 2018. And then in late 2018, I moved back to Vietnam to join Temasek in Hanoi office, where I'm currently working with Lan in the investment team. So yeah, my family is based in Hanoi. I also have 2 kids, 2 fantastic, but also sort of troublemakers. And no, great to see all you here.
great. Well, to start the webinar, why don't we take a look back at the point where you both decided to leave the UK. So Lan, you went back to Singapore, and then Vu, you went back to Vietnam. So why did you make the decision to leave when you left, especially for you, Vu, since you were in the UK for 8 years?
Okay, I take this first. So to me, actually, I spent more than 10 years in the UK. So the move to me was it was not an easy move. But the move back to Vietnam for me, it happened gradually, and then it happened suddenly. I had not really planned for it in a sense that I would draft it out a 5-year plan of when and how to move back. But I definitely had it at the back of my mind that I'd be open to coming back to Vietnam at some point. Right? And then every year when I visited home, I would reach out to people and listen to them about how things are on the ground. So it was not easy for sure, but I really liked my job back then in UK. I was doing what I love to do. But at that time, I also felt quite strongly that going back to Vietnam is something that I must try or I will regret. Right? And I think when it comes to career choice, my philosophy is that you're more likely to regret not having done something rather than having done something. So that's how I decided to make the move back. And the job at Temasek is interesting enough and challenging enough for me to to finally make the move.
And Lan, what about you? What drove your decision?
I don't have such a thoughtful answer as Vũ, because at the time it was really a personal decision. So I was afraid I wasn't able to marry. No, that's just a joke. But my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband, was in Hanoi, so we couldn't do the distant relationship thing. So he gave me the deadline to move myself over to Singapore. So that's how it happened. So it wasn't very thoughtful.
Well, those are two experiences of how you ultimately decided to go back to Vietnam. I guess if somebody was in your shoes, working abroad and thinking about moving back to Vietnam, what factors do you think that, they should consider?
I think everyone is quite different, but for me, as I mentioned, I think the decision to move back to Vietnam wasn't a very thoughtful process or deliberate process. I really went with the flow. But looking back, it was a good decision for me, and I thought, if I were to do it again and to have a more thoughtful consideration, then I would think about, ultimately what's gonna make me happy and what will give the meaning in terms of my life as well as work, right? Because actually recently our company did something called resilience training, and one of the exercise during the resilience training, they help you meditate and took you back to when you were a child and think about your childhood. And then another exercise was to take you to when you are 80 years old and have a chance to reflect about your life. And I realized that for me, I think, what I wanted to achieve, like to see in life is not about, how far do I get in my career, what sort of position do I get to, or how much money do I make, but, how I can contribute or help people around me. It doesn't have to be big, but, when you can make a difference to people and to society around you. So for me, I think now I realize that is quite meaningful for me. So that is, and from, I think, compared to reflecting on, working in London and Singapore versus in Vietnam, I think the biggest plus for me is that I feel that I can make a bigger difference here in Vietnam, rather than staying back in London or Singapore.
No, that's great insight. Ooh, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think that's as good as an answer could be. I really have nothing to add. I guess most of us, when we come back, the number one reason was that we feel we could make a difference, right? And we feel that we can contribute just a little bit to where we came from. Right? And yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Great. So when you both were, making the decision to go back to Vietnam, how did you find the opportunities in Vietnam back then?
For me, I think when I decided to leave London, that was in 2008. So the market in Vietnam was quite narrow at the time. There weren't a lot of opportunities. So I know that I wasn't ready to go straight back to Vietnam. So I thought that Singapore is a good destination to make the transition. And I happened to know a friend who put my resume through to Temasek. So Temasek was the only company that I interviewed with. And it happened very quickly. So I didn't really look around.
It's similar, very similar story for me. I kept in touch with people on the ground, but then a friend who is actually Lan, she know that there's a spot at Temasek that is opening, and then you know, I thought, yeah, it could be a good try, given that I have been thinking about going back at some point, and hence that just happened next. But I guess it's yeah, it happened gradually at first, and then all of a sudden it become real.
Wow. Well, so I know, you know, a big part of the audience today, you know, may be interested in finding opportunities in Vietnam. Do you have any advice for them, or specific resources that they could leverage? You know, I know things have changed a little bit since you both, you know, were looking for your opportunities in Vietnam, but, you know, what advice or recommendations do you have for those looking to make the transition today?
Vũ, do you want to go first?
Can you repeat the question again? It was I lost you a little bit toward the end.
Yeah, so, you know, a big part of our audience today is interested in potentially finding opportunities in Vietnam. Do you have any advice for them on specific resources that they could potentially leverage to find opportunities in Vietnam today?
I wouldn't really call it an advice, but I can share what I did. So, for example, an organization like this, right, the Vietnam Financial Society, or in the US, or VietPro in the UK, are definitely places where you can tap on. You know, where company will typically come to for an open spot, for example. I understand when I was in the UK, I was involved with VietPro in the UK as well. So I understand that companies do come to see them quite often, and there are always opportunities that they are tap on, right? But of course, on the flip side, these opportunities are available for everyone. So of course you will face competition first, you know, at the first touch. Then there are also, if you're really keen to move back to Vietnam, then on the ground there are also reputational recruitment agencies in Vietnam these days. So that the like of Michael Page or RGF or First Alliance, which are big regional, even international headhunters, they're on the ground, and they are quite efficient at finding new jobs. So that's another way of going. And then, you know, they charge you nothing. They charge the company and not you. So sort of they almost sort of free resource for you to tap on. And they wouldn't ever turn down a good CV. That's for sure. They would keep it at the back of their profile, and they will find you a spot. But I guess to me, I mean, those are things that you could do. But I guess the most valuable resources is your sort of proprietary ones, the proprietary network, the connection that you build yourself over time, and by actively reaching out to people. And I think this is not something that you can just build in a short period of time. It's not something you can build over 1 month or 2 months or even 3 months. I feel it's something that you build over the years. You actually reach out to people every time you go back to Vietnam, for example. You establish a connection with them, and over the years, that connection will lead to other connection, which is to other connections. And I feel those are the sort of the proprietary one that are the most valuable for you. That's how I went about it.
That's great. And Lan, do you have any advice or suggestions?
Yeah, totally. I would agree with what Vũ said. I think yes, definitely building your network is quite important. To be honest, when I was still living in Singapore or London, I didn't do that enough. So I wish if I was back then, if people were to give me some advice, then I would definitely like be more proactive in building my network. For people, because I see from the polling earlier, I think the majority of people here are from finance industry. So when you think about moving back to Vietnam, then I think this approach probably like more relevant for people in finance as well as consulting. So first of all, think about, you know, whether you would like to work for a foreign company or for a local company. So that's one. I think some people who are a little bit more flexible, they can go straight to local, but for others, the transition to a foreign company, you know, from overseas to Vietnam through a foreign company might make the transition easier. So first of all, ask yourself, you know, whether you want to, are you open to work for a local company, or you think that you need to work for a foreign company to help you with the transition. So that's one. And then if you want to work for a foreign company, then I would think that the choice are a little bit more limited. A lot of the fund as well as investment banks, they operate out of Singapore. There aren't that many companies that have presence local on the ground like Temasek. So Temasek is a bit of an exception, but that is growing. That's changing. So for instance, like recently, the Korean group SK, they opened quite large rep office in both Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh, and they make large investment. Like they are big investor in Vingroup, Masan, and others. But otherwise, if you think that you want to work for foreign, then also think about like transitioning to Singapore. So I think that's one. And then secondly, if you are open-minded about working for local companies, you think you are flexible enough, then there are more choices, right? So many of the local companies in Vietnam have grown a lot exponentially over the last few years. And actually their compensation is very competitive. I remember when I moved back here 10 years ago, it was quite difficult to find a job that pay about $5,000 a month. Now I would say that it's very easy. Many of the local company pay even a lot more competitive than Temasek, to be honest. So if you are willing to jump into local, then you can think of the larger private banks like Techcombank, VP banks. You know, they take in like a lot of good people, and they have good exposure as well. Very competitive compensation. There are other large corp, for instance, like Masan, Vingroup, and the like. They are also their finance department is also, you know, staffed with people returning from overseas, very competitive. And then another bracket would be like the startup scene, the like of e-commerce, ride-hailing, and so on and so forth. So that's another options. So I think like first of all, think about like what direction you would like to go, and then start to build your network. Like every time you go back to Vietnam, you know, like I know that you need a little bit of rest, but also maybe think about investing some time to reach out and meet with people. Because as Wood mentioned, that took time, right? It took years to build that relationship. And then also, you know, you can go to LinkedIn, use LinkedIn and identify people and reach out and ask if you can schedule a call to introduce yourself, to get to know about the market. So be proactive in that. If you are thinking one day you want to go home, then you can start building that relationship and network now.
That's great advice. Thank you. So one of the things that you mentioned was kind of transitioning. I would love to kind of hear about your transition, both of your transitions from the UK to Vietnam. Can you tell us a little bit, or tell us what the biggest difference was when you were working in London and then when you started working in Vietnam? And did you have to adapt when you first moved back?
I can go first. Because it's pretty fresh for me after just less than 2 years. So, to me, the biggest difference I found is the UK, or I guess even in the US as well. I found that things are heavily specialized, and the work could be quite procedural at times, right? You are a small part of a big machine, and then everybody knows exactly what they are doing every day they come to work. For example, in my previous job, when I was at the hedge fund, I know exactly what sector I'm working for. I know exactly what type of stock I should go long, what type of stock I should go short, for example, and then what kind of event I'm looking forward to. So it's heavily specialized. Meanwhile, in Vietnam, you will likely assume a lot more responsibilities even from day one, and your day will be very different from one day to another. I can say that for the last 2 years, I've been working in Vietnam. Things that happen so fast and so different from one day to another. No day is the same. So I think that's a challenge, and also that is what makes working in a frontier market like Vietnam very exciting. Because there's so many things to do. It's just how you want to plan your day, and it can be very different. And I think that's a key difference for me. I wouldn't say that I have fully adapted yet. I'm still learning. But that's okay. I'll take it slow.
Yeah, for me, I would say that there's a lot of, I would echo what Vũ mentioned as well. So I think like here it's a lot less specialization for sure. But I think just some of the examples that I can give where it's very different. For example, like when I was in London, you know, when you go on holiday, people respect that it's your holiday, so you can just like not answering emails and so on and so forth. And then when I moved to Singapore, there's no concept of holiday. It's like, you know, even if you're on holiday, you still need expected to be on call, for instance. So obviously, I think like each place has its own culture and differences, but I think as long as you keep an open mind and be flexible, I'm sure you will see like the good things of wherever you are. But otherwise, I think like definitely like every place is so different. Like Singapore is so different from Vietnam, and Singapore is so different from London in many different ways that I can't even mention. But I think, you know, as long as you remain flexible, I think it's okay.
Great. So what would you say are some of the advantages and disadvantages for an overseas Vietnamese when working in Vietnam?
When you say overseas Vietnamese, you mean Việt Kiều or like Vietnamese living overseas?
Yeah, I would say VQ probably.
Well, I think the advantage are quite clear. Right? You have experience of working in the most developed markets, and I'm talking about finance in particular. Right? If you have the experience of working in London or New York or Tokyo, you've been there, right? You basically say that, okay, I made it. Not made it in a big way, but I've had the experience that I need to have, because working in finance in those markets is probably as far as you can get in terms of your career progress, right? So you have a benchmark of how developed markets function. You know how people do things, where, you know, how do people do things in a proper way at the top markets in the world. So you've seen that, right? You've seen how people do things. And then when you come back, you always have a benchmark of, okay, I know this is how things should be done, but of course I can be flexible from there. So I think that the advantage is clear. And then that experience to me is quite valuable, and that not many people can really have. So that's a quite clear advantages. In terms of disadvantage, I wouldn't say that, I wouldn't call that a disadvantage, but you know that you surely have to learn to adopt to the local market, and you have to know how things work in Asia. You have to have a really open mind, because things function differently here in Asia, in Vietnam, right? The culture is different. How people do deals are different. How people interact with each other are also different. Even the corporate ladder is different. You know, in terms of the hierarchy in corporate are very different from how corporates are functioned in developed world. So I guess there's certainly some difference there. And if you don't come in with an open mind, you sometimes you feel that you probably will not belong to the market.
That's great. Lan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think just one thing to add that I think you know, if you think about Vietnam, it only started open up like in the late 90s. So we are what less than 30 years. Do I get my math right? No. Yeah, like just over 20 years of opening up. I would say that the entrepreneurs in Vietnam are still quite inward looking and lacks of connectivity to the world. So as an overseas Vietnamese returning, I think definitely they would bring that connectivity and that outward looking perspective. I can give many examples of successful Vietnamese returnee, right? Overseas Vietnamese in Vietnam, for example, Don Lam, who founded LDR Capital, or Techcombank, the previous CEO as well as CFO. They were both Vietnamese overseas. Or at Masan, many of the senior executives are also Vietnamese overseas. So there are many successful cases in Vietnam.
Great. So on the job searching aspect, what backgrounds and skill sets are important for private equity firms in the region? In other words, what are they looking for? Are they looking for specific skill sets or backgrounds? What do you think could help a candidate stand out in the recruiting process?
I think it really depends on the level. So I was seeing earlier in the poll, I think a majority of people would have less than 6 years of experience. I would say at that level, I think, you know, technicality, like strong foundation in terms of technical skills are quite important. I think at that level, I don't think like in terms of specific connection or network or deal origination are highly required, but I think a strong foundation in terms of technical skill. And then if during that period, if the candidate already managed to build their own network, can do some origination, that would be a plus.
I think to me, beside the technicality, that's for sure. To me, what typically I found interesting in a candidate is that he or she has a wide range of interest in terms of understanding what is going on in the world. Basically, intellectual curiosity. As when I talk to a candidate, if I can talk about politics, can I talk about economics, if I can talk about what's even happening in science, for example, if the candidate is sort of well-versed in what is happening in the world, what exactly is happening outside the Excel model, then I find that candidate would be super interesting, and I find that, you know, that kind of candidate would be great, would be a great value add for the company.
That's a good point, and I would just supplement that, because Vũ actually brought up a good point. Like we recently went through a lot of interviews for our recruitment. So one thing that struck me is that compared to candidates from Singapore, because I used to live in Singapore, we also work for a Singaporean company, so our benchmark is Singapore. A lot of people started investing very young. You know, it doesn't need to start with a large amount, but even at college, they already started doing their investment. So coming back to this point about, like, you know, working for PE. So basically, if you want to work for PE, you are interested in a career in investment, right? Then what we found is that for a lot of the Vietnamese candidates, there's not a mindset of investing, like personal investing, early enough. So most of the candidates that we see don't do like personal investing. Meanwhile, like I would say, like majority of Singaporean candidates would have done personal investing already. So that is something to think about as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's great advice to help stand out, you know, in a bunch of resumes. So I guess to pivot away from your personal experience, let's move on to some market questions and just some overviews. Can you tell us a little bit more about Temasek and the investments the firm has made in Vietnam, and as well as your responsibility and the team's responsibility?
Yeah, so Temasek was founded in 1974. and Temasek is wholly owned by the Singapore Ministry of Finance. In the early day when it was set up to house the privatized SOEs of the Singapore, the like of Singapore Airlines, Singapore Telecom, DBS, and so on. So that was the role of the company for the first, I would say, my math is very bad, maybe like 20 plus years. And then in the early 2000, when we had a new CEO, when she joined, she started to expand the investment overseas. So I think in 2004, Temasek opened their first few office outside Singapore, which is in India, China, and Vietnam. So since then, I think Temasek has pushed a lot of investment overseas. As of now, I think like Singapore accounts for only a quarter of the portfolio. The total investment at the moment, the total asset under management is about 200 billion US. And it's quite unique in the sense that Temasek can invest in both public as well as private equities. I would say about half of the portfolio are listed stock and half of the portfolio are private. In terms of investment in Vietnam, so as I mentioned, Vietnam was one of the office that was one of the first few to be opened in 2004 alongside India and China. So at that time, China was going through a lot of privatization. So in China, Temasek managed to invest in some of the privatized SOEs, such as China Construction Bank or Bank of China. So Temasek was hoping to replicate that success in Vietnam. Unfortunately, the privatization in Vietnam didn't play out. There was like some privatization, and then the process was stopped, and then it was start again, and so on and so forth. So so we realized that we cannot be we cannot rely on SOE privatization, and also as the private companies in Vietnam are growing very fast. If you think about it, like when I first moved back 10 years ago, I would say more than half of the largest 20 listed companies are state-owned. So whether they are banks like Vietcombank, Vietinbank, or oil and gas like Petro Vietnam Gas or PVD and the like. And now 10 years later, it has flipped. A lot of the large cap are now privately owned, right? So we have pivoted our investment towards that direction. Right now, our total portfolio in the country is, I would say that it's more than $500 million. And we also, like, same as Temasek, we invest in both listed as well as unlisted stock. For listed, we have Vinhomes and a couple of other blue chips. And then on the private side, we have BNG, we have S-Commerce, which does e-commerce logistic. And in terms of responsibilities, then we work very closely with the team in Singapore from origination of the deal, execution, and manage the investment until the day we divest. So it's full cycle, and it's in collaboration with the team in Singapore. Would you like to add anything?
No, I think you gave it the full speech. Nothing to add from me.
That's super interesting, especially since you have such a broad mandate to do both kind of public and private investing under your umbrella. So I guess when it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on how investing in publicly listed and private companies in Southeast Asia is different than investing in from the rest of the world.
I think clearly the Southeast Asia market is just a fraction of US or Europe, right? So the difference here would come back to the point that I mentioned earlier about a specialist and a generalist. In the US, for example, you have lots of private equity firms that specialize in one sector only. For example, a healthcare private equity firm or a consumer private equity fund, for example, and those guys only do their own sector. Meanwhile, in Southeast Asia or in Asia, a PE fund typically will do everything. thing, simply because the market here is too nascent, and you have to be open to all kind of sectors. And then the other point is about taking control. So I think the ability to get a majority stakes is a key difference between Southeast Asia private equity and US or Europe. In Southeast Asia or in Asia in general, it's typically very difficult to obtain control because of the family ownership structure. With respect to family, it depends on the family situation, but here you typically see that there are still a lot of first generation entrepreneurs, and as a result, they are unless they are ready to retire, the owner is generally not willing to give up control of the business, for example. Right? So here you're playing with minorities. Meanwhile, in the US or Europe, you're looking for a majority stake. And to me, those are the two key differences.
And to kind of add to that, would you say there's anything that's unique to investing in Vietnam relative to the rest of Southeast Asia? Or is that kind of very similar as well?
I would say it's quite similar. Every deal has its issues. I've never had the pleasure of having a deal that has no issue.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Never easy to get a deal done. Well, I guess what is your view on the Vietnamese market? Just broadly speaking, what is your outlook?
I guess we're all bullish on Vietnam. That's why we're here, right? So that's for a start. I think Vietnam is certainly a very exciting market. And then for sure is one of the most attractive ones in Southeast Asia. But I guess the issue with Vietnam is deal size, right? The market is still very small. $100 million deal here is very, very hard to come by. So that naturally will limit the playground for big players. Right? Hopefully over time, as the market develops, the issue hopefully will be resolved naturally. But if you think about the market of Vietnam, I think the stock market total market cap is less than 200 billion. It's still very, very small. And then you look at the VN30, the top index, you can count on one hand the stocks that trade more than $10 million a day. And then that the size is a big sort of limit to how much people can really invest in here. But again, if you're taking a long-term view, then I think there's a lot of tailwind for Vietnam to grow. And I guess that's at least I believe so, and that's why we're all here.
Yeah. So, how are you spending your time sourcing and finding these opportunities in Vietnam?
Sorry, can you say that again? Can you repeat the question?
How are you sourcing these opportunities to invest in these various companies in Vietnam?
Well, Lan would know this much better than me because she spent the last 10 years here. But I would say there's no sort of secret sauce to find deals here. You basically have to lever all kind of sources that you can see, ranging from sell side to bankers, to your private connection, to people who know people. And I feel that's there's I don't have a formula, I really. And that's also what makes this market exciting, because you can do everything. You can it's up to you how you plan your day and how you plan your connection, how you plan your deal sourcing. Yeah, I think I don't have a formula of time or how I do stuff here. Lan might have a better answer than mine.
No, I think, yeah, I don't think there's any specific formula, but I think for us, I would say in a way for Temasek it's a little bit easier because our deal size is so large. Like our minimum ticket size is $100 million. So that naturally really narrows the set of opportunities for us already. And then we identify a couple of industry that we are more interested in. It could be like financial services, consumer, and tech, right? So, and then if we identify the industry, and then we are limited by the size of the company we invest in. So the pool actually is not that large.
Okay, that's helpful. Shifting gears a little bit to be a little bit more topical, how has COVID-19 affected your businesses that you've invested in? Have you experienced any disruption or deal flow of your portfolio companies?
Vu, do you want to take this?
I don't, but okay, I try. No, in terms of so there are two parts to the question. One is, does it affect our operation on the ground, and secondly, how does it affect our portfolio company? So, in terms of operation on the ground, for the last, I say almost since the beginning of the year, we've been working mostly from home, and our sort of working on deals or communication with each other. Exchanging ideas have been mostly online, and that has been the default mode. Of course, that created some challenge, right? Because it's always easier to fly ideas around when you're sitting sort of 1 meters away from each other. But I would say we are getting used to it. To some extent, we also enjoy the flexibility of being able to work at home. And people actually say that you actually work more when you work from home, and I'm gratified that is probably true. You sort of lose track of time to some extent. So that's probably the biggest change, and we realize that okay, working from home is not that bad. It doesn't really hinder the process that much, and as a matter of fact, this year we managed to do. It has been a relatively productive year so far. So we closed the Vinhome deal, which a pretty landmark deal for us in Vietnam this year, in the middle of COVID. So we feel quite happy about that. So that's the operation side. In terms of portfolio company, the impacts have been mixed. Company that has been technology focused, like for example for like BNG, they definitely saw they probably saw some tailwind. But on the other hand, company that are more sort of relying on physical asset or sort of physical people going through the stores, of course they saw the impact. So the impact have been mixed. And I think, and also if you look at the stock market, the market in Vietnam took a very big dive in March and April before it had a rebound. And even though the rebound looked healthy, but the Vietnam stock market is still underwater year to date. So of course that will have some certain impacts.
That's great. Lan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, one of the good things about COVID is that we don't travel so much, so that's the good thing.
So in regards to Vietnam, do you think the country is going to continue to attract foreign investments in the next decade or two? And do you think there's going to be more offices of foreign investment firms like Temasek in Vietnam popping up?
Yeah, because I think for me, when I reflected how Vietnam has developed over the last 10 years, I think definitely the economy has become a lot more resilient. So when I first moved back, I think import and export was, like as in like the export, the manufacturing export industry was quite nascent. One of our portfolio companies, Samcorp, owns the largest industrial parks. The chain of industrial park in the country is called Vietnam Singapore Industrial Parks. They have 6 or 7 industrial parks around the country. So a couple of years ago, they were leasing out maybe 30 to 50 hectares of land per year. And now they are looking at a run rate of closer to 100 hectares per year, and they don't have sufficient land for like the demand outweighs supply. So I think definitely the trend of like manufacturing moving from China to Vietnam is happening and accelerating. So we have compared, if you look around the region, you will see that if you look around Southeast Asia, you will see that Vietnam has quite dynamic growth model. So on the one hand, we have the manufacturing export growth pillar. That's one, which gives us a little bit of similarity to China. The second is our domestic consumption, which is very strong because we have a young population of 100 million people. So that makes us a little bit similar to Indonesia's story. And then thirdly, we have, if you notice, tourism has increased massively over the last few years. I think like when I first moved back, we have an annual tourist arrival of about 5 million. And then before COVID, I think last year we were like at 12, 13 million and growing strong. Actually, it's probably like more than 15 million already before COVID. So that gives us a bit of similarity to Thailand, because Thailand is also an economy that relies heavily on tourism. And then lastly, Vietnam, actually, thanks to many of the Vietnamese overseas, we also have a large remittance as well. I think we are in the top 10 countries in the world in terms of remittance. So that makes us a little bit similar to Philippines. But then each of the economy, like Indonesia, they have very large population, 250 million. So they have like strong domestic consumption, but their economy, they don't have manufacturing. They don't have as strong as like manufacturing, export, tourism. They're very subject to like commodity cycle. Thailand, I think the median age of Thailand is already so much older. And they also rely a little bit more on tourism. For Philippines, they don't have manufacturing. They relies on more like BPO, remittance, and also they have a large and young population. But we have like each of everything, right? We have like manufacturing, export, domestic consumption, tourism, as well as remittance. So I think that over the last 10 years, definitely the economy has become a lot more resilient, more dynamic. And in terms of policies, the government, despite everything everyone say, I would actually think that the government is they are getting better over time. So take State Bank of Vietnam, for instance. In the past, they used to be a lot more reactive in terms of responding to policy, like in terms of their policy response. So take exchange rate. It used to be that the black market exchange rate will be leading. So when there's a big devaluation in the black market, the State Bank will respond with an official devaluation of the currency. So they used to be a lot more reactive, but that doesn't happen anymore. They have been a lot more proactive in their policies. So you see that the exchange rate has been very stable in the last 5 years, even though the currency in the region actually quite volatile. And then secondly, like another example I would give is that in terms of credit growth, back in 2008, 2009, credit growth used to be like 30, 40%, which leads to the overheating of the economy. But now the State Bank is more proactive when they see, coming out of the crisis in Vietnam in 2012, they did let credit growth to be like 20-30% for a period of time, and then when they see that credit growth is like probably too much, they're already proactive in tightening that before a crisis hit, right? So that's another example of how the regulator are being a lot better these days. So I think with all these factors, I'm very positive on the long-term growth potential of Vietnam. And to your question about whether, more firms are opening in Vietnam, as I mentioned, like SK Group is opening, and then many others as well. So definitely every year there are more. So yeah, it's very exciting time.
Yeah, certainly. Definitely paints a bullish photo or picture for Vietnam. Ooh, do you have anything else to add to that?
I agree. There's not much for me to add, to be honest. Yeah.
Great. So let's pivot to some closing thoughts before we move over to Q&A from the audience. So personally, what are your plans for the next few years, personally and just career-wise?
I mean, career-wise, I really hope we can do more attractive deals in Vietnam for sure. I really, I mean that's probably one of the key reasons why I'm coming back. I wanted to, I hope I can play a part in contributing to Temasek in Vietnam, and also indirectly in contributing to the Vietnam economy and to the growth of Vietnam. I think making a difference is what attracts most of us to back to our homeland. So yeah, sure. Career-wise, that's what I would love to do. I mean, personal-wise, I do want to learn more about the use of big data, machine learning, and AI, and all the fancy technology that people are talking about. I have a sense that there is something that is really important, but I have the duty of not understanding them sufficiently, right? I have a sense that the traditional finance skills and knowledge that you learn from, CFA or economic textbook will become less relevant in the future as we move forward. And what will replace them? I don't know. But I have a sense that understanding and the ability to understand and interpret data will at least bridge some of the gap. Right? And if you look at around the world now, we are in a world of negative interest rate, and no economic textbook will ever tell you exactly what's going to happen next, or how is it possible that you have negative interest rate everywhere in the world. So it's a real life example that things that you've learned in the past that you spend years at university are becoming sort of irrelevant in the world. And I, for personal development, I would love to be able to comprehend that and to bridge some of the knowledge gap that I feel that I really have at the moment.
Great. And Lan, what about yourself?
Yeah, I just want to add that you shouldn't ask Vu like on personal, because like his old things, he can play the guitar, can speak Chinese, and so on and so forth. So it's very impressive.
Thanks.
For me, career-wise, I think when I went to LSE, I didn't know, actually, originally I thought I wanted to be a chemical engineer before I went to LSE. But anyway, didn't get scholarship to study chemical engineering. So I ended up at LSE. And even at LSE, I don't know what I wanted to do. So I stumbled upon the career of being an investor by chance. And I realized that I was quite fortunate because that's the career that I like. So, long-term wise, I want to become a better investor, become a good investor. Ultimately, I'm not yet, right? So I want to become a good investor. And personal wise, as I mentioned, I have like 2 sons, 8 and 10 years old. So I am planning to send them off probably to boarding school when they reach mid-teen. So I only have a few years left with them. So yeah, outside of work, that's where I spend my time. I want to catch them, like be with them before they go away from me.
Right. Well, quarantine is a great way to spend more time with them.
Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely.
And lastly, do you have any pieces of advice for overseas Vietnamese? So basically, Vietnamese that are living abroad or VQs who are looking into Vietnam. Any final thoughts on that?
I guess don't be scared.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
go for it. I mean, if you feel like something that you have to do, just go and do it. You have nothing to lose. So, but frankly speaking, I don't feel I'm in a position to advise anyone, right? Because I'm also a new kid on the block here. I've been here only for 2 years, and whether this a good move or not, I that only time can tell. So what can I do? What I can do is to share my experience so far with you guys. So yeah, I feel I'm not in the stage where I can really give advice. So I will leave that to Lan.
No, I think go wherever your heart tell you. It will take you to the right place, I guess.
It's a romantic ending for the night.
Yeah. And so with that, let's turn to Q&A. I think Vu is gonna lead the Q&A from the audience.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts so far. And I think the last session of today is gonna be just answering questions that they have posed. And Lan and Vu, do you see? Can you open the Q&A chart on the bottom next to participant? think we have a lot of questions over there, around 21
Yeah.
questions, but we can go over kind of like the most upvoted questions. And so if you want to interact with our speakers, you can raise your hand, or you can message me directly, and I can unmute you to ask a question to the speakers. But for now, we're just going to go over the questions, unless you want to ask the question yourself. The first question is, how is the compensation level in Vietnam? Is there a significant gap, and how you overcome it to make the decision to go back to Vietnam? A lot of people care about compensation, I guess. 10 people have voted.
I think Vũ, you are better in taking this one.
Wow. You guys have, this is a tough question. Okay, I have to, how to say, I think, well, what I can say is that, as I mentioned earlier, many years ago, you would find it difficult to get a job that pay you $5,000 per month. But now these jobs are becoming more and more available for you guys. It depends on your level of seniority, your level of experience, and think my sense is that company to sorry, I think I just got disconnected just right there.
I couldn't hear you actually.
Yeah, sorry, my internet just shut down for some reason. I don't know where I left it at, but I was saying that my sense is that companies in Vietnam now, they are more and more willing to compensate you for the value you can bring, and they are closing, or at least getting there, closing the gap with international compensation. Having said that, you all have to also factor in the fact that the living standard in Vietnam is much lower than in Europe or US. The tax rate in Vietnam is also lower than the tax rate in the US or in the UK, for example. So there are definitely certain factors that will impact your compensation. But I would say the gap is closing, and as long as you can prove your value, I would say you'll be fine.
I would add to that in Vietnam, actually, outside of your like work, there are a lot of investment opportunities as well, right? So like in terms of real estate or like startup. So actually I think, to be honest, I don't think compensation is an issue. Like, because there are, even if your official job does not pay the same, there are a lot of other opportunities to invest.
Thank you. The next question is it difficult for foreigners who do not speak Vietnamese to find a job in finance and banking?
Not at all. I think like in many of the banks these days, like Techcombank or like even Vietcombank, they also hiring foreigners, because I think like now people can speak English quite well, so it's not an issue.
Okay. The next question comes from Mi Tian Lei, and I think she would like to speak to the panelists, so I'm gonna unmute her. Hello?
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yeah. You want to introduce
right.
yourself before asking the question?
Yeah, sure. My name is Dinh Lê, and I'm originally from Vietnam, but now I'm a senior student, college student from Washington, D.C. And my major is finance. I'm focusing on risk management right now. So my question were, did the transition between two working cultures affect you greatly? And how did you overcome it? And did you have any mentor when you moved back to Vietnam? Because I'm gonna go back to Vietnam next summer actually. So this is gonna be really important to me.
Okay, I can take this. I think that there are certain differences in the working culture, and yeah, and I guess you were referring to the professional environment. There are definitely there's certain cultural difference. And as I mentioned before, the difference can be from the corporate hierarchy, for example. Typically, my understanding is that, or at least from my experience, the corporate ladder in US or in Europe or in London is pretty flat. Meanwhile, in Asia and in Vietnam, there's still some hierarchy there. It's not right or wrong. It's not good or bad. It's just different. It's just the way that people do things here. So that's one. And then also the way you deal with people, how people do deals, how people interact with each other, it is also different. But I would say, those are not things that you should put in a negative spin, right? Though are just simply differences. And as long as you keep an open mind, and given that you are originally from Vietnam, I don't see you have any difficulty of coping with that, right? I would even call it overcoming. Overcoming seems to be a bit too harsh for me. It's just accepting the difference and have an open mind to adopt, to blend in with the local culture. And I guess that's a good skill to have as you go along your career as well. You will always have to adapt, being from one company to another, from one country to another, or from one culture to another. I think the ability to adapt is always valuable. So yeah, I think that's absolutely fine, as long as you keep an open mind. I know I did not have a mentor.
Thank you so
I
much.
think you raise a good point about having a mentor. I've had the opportunity to have mentor from early on in my career, and I have different mentor at different stage in my career, and I think they are of great value. So yeah, if you have the opportunity, look out for someone to be a mentor for you throughout your career.
Can I look out to you?
Yeah, sure. Drop me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, and then we can take it from there.
Yes, thank you so much. That's actually really insightful.
Thank you. The next question comes from Nguyen. Hello, Đức. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me well?
Mhm.
Hey all, first of all, I want to thank you for having this webinar. I think it's very useful. And my name is Nguyen. I'm currently a credit risk analyst covering the hedge fund PE industry. And I want to look for opportunities to come back to the ASEAN region and Vietnam in the next few years. And my question is, there has been some speculation about Vietnam moving to the emerging market bucket, I think over the last few years. I think the latest update was it's still on the watch list for some settlement issues. Do you guys think that we'll get to that point in the next 1 or 2 years? And what would be the implication of that for the market and for Temasek in Vietnam?
That's a great question. I think this is a question also at national level. Right? Every time when we go to a conference with we investor who are interested in Vietnam, this same question will come up again and again. And I remember Dominic Scriven, who is the chairman of LDR Capital, he said that if I'm paid, if I ask for $1 every time this question is asked, I'll be a billionaire by now. So you can see how much people care about Vietnam being upgraded to the emerging markets. I understand the latest update from FTSE is that we are again put on the review list for consideration for September 2021. So we have missed the 2020 window, so we have to wait for another year. But if I have to make a bet, I wouldn't bet on Vietnam becoming EM in the next maybe 2 or 3 years. I think there are many things that it's not just how big the market is. I mean, if you put Vietnam on the same sort of ranking in terms of market cap and the size of the economy with many other emerging market like Pakistan, for example, is I think it's already, or Kuwait, it's already an emerging market. It's quite strange why we're not. But I think from FTSE's perspective, they also put a lot of considerations on the transparency of the accounting standards, the popularity of English as a main business language, as well as a regulatory environment. And as you might know that the new security law in Vietnam will only be implemented from January 2021, and there are still quite a lot of breaches to be made in that law. So you know, I think realistically, I wouldn't make a bet. You know, at least in the next two years. I think 5 years we is possible. But personally, I feel less than 2 years it's a bit too optimistic. I mean, the impact of making an EM data is tremendous, right? You know, not to mention the first thing is fund flow. Right? There's so many EM tracker in the world these days, and once Vietnam is in the EM status, then fund flow will flow to Vietnam massively. It's quite clear that a lot of fund will now have to start buying the Vietnamese market, and I think that the impact will be tremendous for the market. Yeah.
Lan, anything to add before we move on to the next question?
No, nothing further from me.
Okay, sure. I saw Nguyen raise her hand, so just gonna unmute her.
So hi everyone, thank you very much for all your insight today. I'm a final year student from Bucknell University, which is a small LSE college in the US. The question I want to ask you is that, as you mentioned about the constantly changing market, and also I see that Ngu has a master degree and Lan also have interest in engineering. So definitely you guys are very, have a high degree of critical thinking. Do you advise like final year student like us to either studying a master degree or PhD or anything else to increase our competency? Thank you very much.
Would you like to take this because you have a master degree?
Frankly speaking, with you, Chan, I actually thought about doing a PhD before I came back to Vietnam. I had a strong, because I was doing, so before I came back to Vietnam, I was trading energy stocks. And since then, I developed a big interest into renewable energy because I was doing quite deep work in solar energy, you know, and solar and wind and renewable. So I actually thought about doing a PhD, but I think it's a very personal thing, right? Because I have 2 kids and I can't see myself doing a PhD every night. The family situation, it's just too tough to do that. So I think it really depends on you and what you want to do. If you know, let's say if you want to be an investor and doing sort of like practical investing stuff, like buying stocks and you know, doing deals, and I would say a PhD is not that critical. I mean, you can do it, but the value add to buying stock and to being an investor is not that huge from a PhD. Right? I mean, the best investor in the world these days, I think none of them have a PhD. I mean, they probably have CFA, but I can't recall one on top of my head. A top investor in the world these days who have PhD. I mean, I'm talking about like simple fundamental stuff, right? I mean, if you want to do quant, then it's different thing. Renaissance is run by a top scientist, so that's a different thing. So unless you want to do quant investing, then I would say a PhD is not that critical. Unless you want to do quant or you want to go down the research route of finance, then I would say PhD is not that critical. I mean, of course you can do it, and the more you do, the better you will be. But I wouldn't say you have to kill for that.
I'm just gonna add this one from personal experience. Like I don't quite like to study, so the moment I finished my bachelor degree, I think that was the end of it, and I've never managed to take any exam after my bachelor degree. But I think in our job today, because things changing so fast, so we constantly have to learn new things all the time on the job, right? So like it never get easier. Things like every year I have to learn about some new industry, new trends, and so on and so forth. So it's forever learning. But aside from that, I didn't do a MBA. So later on, some people did ask me like whether they should do an MBA or not. And I think where it's probably more relevant for people who study outside of the US, I actually think that an MBA experience is quite relevant for people who study in UK, for instance, where it was, I think, typically the study in the UK is quite classroom based and it's not, to be honest, not that practical. Then an MBA might help, and then it's think of it as the time where you can have a lot of fun, and then also meet new people. So that is something to think about.
Thank you. I'm gonna, the next question comes from Đức Dung Nguyen. Hello?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for spending time today. So a little bit about myself. I'm actually very relevant to Chị Lan just mentioned. I have working experience in Vietnam and just joined the MBA last year. Currently a second year in the US. And my question is, what do you love about investment? And in other words, like what motivates you to wake up every day in the morning? And also, I think you briefly mentioned this before, but could you share more about the work-life balance in PE in general and Temasek in specifically? Yep.
There's no work-life balance, man. That's a dream. I'm kidding. Please, no, it's okay. Okay. Let me take the first question. What attracted me to investing, and it's not just PE or public stock, but I think what makes investing very exciting is one thing. First, it's a continuous learning curve, right? As Warren Buffett used to say, your experience, your knowledge compounds over time, and the more you want to do investing, the more you have to learn, and it's a non-stop process. You wake up every day and you feel that there's a new thing that you need to learn, and that continuous learning curve is really exciting. If you are a person with intellectual curiosity, that is a very rewarding journey for me. It's not just that you can make 30-40% return, but the fact that you becoming a relatively smarter person than you were yesterday is already very rewarding. And I think investing as an investor, that is something that is something that is really attractive. And the second thing about investing is that it doesn't matter who you are. You can be a complete anonymous person, but your investment return doesn't lie. If you make 20% IRR every year for the next 10 years, you are a great investor. It doesn't matter whether you are just an undergrad or even you are even if you have like only 3 or 5 year experience. Your investment return it says it all. It's a fair game, right? The market is fair. You make a return and that's it. No one can take that away from you. It's a fair game. It's open up for everybody. It doesn't matter if you have 10 MBAs from Harvard or not. Your investment return, it is what it is. And I think that sort of very fair playing game. That's what makes it very attractive. So to me, that are two things that that attract me to this profession.
Lan, you have anything to add?
About work-life balance, I think it's better than investment banking, to be honest. So I did my internship at Merrill Lynch Investment Banking when Merrill Lynch was still Merrill Lynch instead of BMO. I thought it was like I couldn't take it. Like after one summer, I ran away from it. For investment, I think it's better, but still, I think it's still quite tough, to be honest.
Thank you. The next question, anonymous. What are some of the preconceptions that people have for professionals who have been abroad when they return? So like people like you who come back, and how do you manage that?
I don't know if about you, but I don't see any preconceptions, to be honest. I didn't realize there's any preconception.
Same with me. If any, it was mostly positive. People think that you have international experience, so they will naturally like to hear what you have to say about your experience. So yeah, for me, it's all positive so far.
Awesome. Move on. How did you first build your network when you first returned to Vietnam?
Vu, you want to take this one?
I'm still on it, to be honest. I am still trying to build my network, sort of slowly, but hopefully surely. So how do I do that? I think
maybe let me jump in and give the example of my mentee. Actually, he after graduation from the US, he returned to Hanoi. I thought he did great. For me, when I returned to Vietnam, I quickly had like 2 kids. So to be honest, there's not much of networking. But looking at him, I think what he's doing is great. So he joined SEO, Sponsor for Educational Opportunity program. I think that's a very good platform. If you don't know it yet, look it up. It's called Sponsor for Educational Opportunity, the branch in Vietnam. So I think it's a network where people are very willing to help each other out. So I think that's a very good starting point for him. And then I think what he does is he regularly organize like different together of people around the same level of experience, but from different industry. So from one day they can be talking, like someone working in marketing can be sharing their experience about marketing, and another day the person understanding about finance can share their experience about working in finance. So he's very proactive in doing that. And he has an interest in startup, so he also like reach out to different startup and then help them in what he has some investment banking background, so he does help them with the like preparing fundraising material and so on. So I thought what he's doing is great, and I wish I did something similar when I first moved back.
Okay. The next question is, do you have any views on ESG impact investing in Vietnam?
Who is our ESG champion?
So I think the concept of ESG in Vietnam is still at a very nascent stage. The country is still, I mean, for a start, right? Hanoi is super polluted. So I think the concept of ESG in Vietnam is still at a very, very early stage. Even though the investment we saw a lot of investment into the renewable energy space. So that has some of the features of ESG. But I would say, if you're looking for real sort of European standard type of ESG investment, then in Vietnam it's not quite there yet. What we do at Temasek is we incorporate a ESG framework into our investment process, and it's a very rigorous framework. There are many areas where we will not invest if that investment doesn't meet the ESG standard that we set for ourselves. It can range from the actual industry that the company operates in, the carbon footprint of the company, and also the total carbon footprint of Temasek as a whole. So there are many aspects of ESG that we have to take into account. And it's not, I would say it's not a trend anymore. It's part of the investment process now. It's inherent in the investment process. And I think going forward, that's what you probably will see in the investment world, where ESG will become inherent into your investment decision. It's not like something nice to have, but it is part of the process. And I think there are numerous studies that have shown that an ESG sort of ESG friendly portfolio will generate better investment return over time. So the numerical evidence is there, and the industry will start to move into direction. And I think in 2019 and 2020, the funds flow into ESG, into ESG investment or investment that have the ESG framework has increased exponentially compared to the previous year. I think it has gone up like 5 or 10 times, something like that. So yeah, I think that is something that you as an investor, we have to continuously bear that in mind and incorporate that into our process.
Awesome. So we are about to run out of time. So I think the last question, I think it's a good closing question from Viet Le, is that what is you talk about impact that you wanted to make in Vietnam. So can you share about kind of like the impact that you made, or kind of like your experience about making changes in Vietnam?
I think, as I mentioned, I think entrepreneurship in Vietnam is very, very new, right? It's a 20, 30 years phenomenon. So it's there's still so much opportunity to growth. So if we can help, find capital to fund this growth, that is like, I see that is helping. And then also, as I mentioned, none of the investment ever goes smoothly. I've never had that pleasure. So, working through the issues and the challenges with the entrepreneurs, I think running a business is very challenging. So, if we can support the entrepreneurs to go through that journey, I think that is also very, it means a lot to me.
I would, I'm back for less than 2 years, so it's too big for me. The word impact is too big for me. I wouldn't even dare to go near that word. But I can quote an example of the investment that we made last year into S-commerce. It is a logistic company that serves the e-commerce industry, and the e-commerce industry in Vietnam is still at a very early stage, and it's growing fast. And S-commerce itself is also a relatively young company. It was founded only 7-8 years ago, and the founder of that company is also a very young guy. I think he's born in 1988. Went to Ho Chi Minh Bách Khoa University, studied technology by himself at the university, and then went down. He worked for a couple of years in mobile world, and then set out, and he saw the gap in the market, and come out and set up his own company from scratch. And over 7 years, he managed to grow that company from zero to become one of the biggest logistic player in Vietnam these days, right? So that kind of, and he's like, 100% Vietnamese, and his team are mostly Vietnamese as well. And we have the opportunity to come in and contribute to the growth story and the growth of his company. And we feel great. We feel it's a privilege, and we feel it's a great impact that we can help, that we can make to the company, to be partner with them along the growth path. Again, the word impact is too big for me, but I felt great that I play a small part in that whole process, and see the company grow. And this sort of tick one of the boxes why I came back to Vietnam from the beginning.
That's a very interesting story to share. So we have reached an hour and a half mark. Definitely a very fruitful conversation. So thank you so much, Lan and Vu, for your time sharing your experience today. Please stay in touch for the audience today with VFS through our Facebook, LinkedIn channels, or email us at team@vfsociety.org. Again, thanks everyone, and thanks Diem for your time moderating this event as well. Hope everyone have a good night, good evening, good morning, and hope you see you again at future events.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks
Great
everyone.
to talk to you all. Good luck.
Hope to see more of you in Hanoi. Reach out to us if you come back.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be great to grab a beer or coffee at some point.
Once the borders reopen.
Yes.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.